I've always wanted to fly. My whole life, always wanted to be a pilot, always wanted to fly. It makes the world a much smaller place. And then when I lost my husband to lymphoma, when he was only 55, I realized, you know what? Life is really short. So if you've got something on your bucket list, you get off your butt and do it. That life is really short, and you should at least be able to reach for something that you've always dreamed of doing. Find a way to do it. For a lot of people, that's getting your private pilot's license. I got mine in 2011. And I kind of literally got the cart before the horse, because I bought a Cirrus SR-20, because I knew that was the plane that I really wanted to learn in. I wanted the safest private plane that you could get. The Cirrus is the kind that's got the parachute built into the whole body of the plane, with what I lovingly call the oh shit bar, because that's just what you're going to scream if you really need to use it. So I wanted something that was incredibly safe, because my son, who now is 20, he couldn't be here tonight, but he wanted to fly as well. And I thought, if the two of us are going to learn how to fly, we're going to do it in the safest thing possible. So I got my license in 2011, and glad to say my son Dante got his private pilot's license between his junior and senior year of high school.
Well, actually, I took my first flying lesson when I was 16 years old, but I only lasted a half hour, and I blew up a Volkswagen engine, and I was broke. So it's laid dormant until I was about 35 years old, and a friend of mine gave me an experimental aircraft magazine, and I read a little article about building your own airplane. And I read it in about 10 minutes, and I walked out of the office, and I said, Ralph, this is really neat. I'm going to build this airplane. And that was 1st of February. That following weekend, I took my first real flying lesson. I got my license in July, and I went to Oshkosh, and I bought that airplane, and I ended up building it. So I didn't start until I was 35 years old, and I built a couple airplanes, and I flew as a Sunday morning with the expensive breakfast, $100 breakfast for a few years, and an opportunity came here at Washington County with the air ambulance business, and I purchased that in 2007, and I turned a perfectly good hobby into a job. But to be quite truthful, one of the key things here was the Washington Flyers Club. I've been an extremely active member since the 90s, and one of the things that I think is unique about aviation is you really meet an awful lot of very wonderful people, got a lot of initiative, a lot of enthusiasm for life. And I think that's the biggest advantage of being the aviator is really meeting an awful lot of nice people.
I was actually, my dad used to take me to air shows. At that time, it was Williams Air Force Base, which a lot of the military pilots went through there for the Air Force training in the T-37 and T-38s. Back then, it was something different. But I used to go to those, sit in the airplanes when I was a kid, and never really thought much of it until I went to college. And when I was in college, I ended up getting a part-time job in airport operations at Scottsdale Airport, which is one of the busiest corporate airports in the country. And I figured, well, I'm already there almost every day because I was part-time, so I just wanted hours. So I was already there. I decided I would just get my pilot's license. I'd show up an hour before my shift or so and get my training. So luckily, I ended up getting my license at 40 hours. And one of the busiest airspaces around there in Phoenix and so forth, I was lucky enough to have a air traffic controller as an instructor. So he was able to talk the other controllers into letting us fly into Sky Harbor when most people didn't. But that was how I got into aviation. I was a aviation management major, which is got a big long name to it, but for the most part, you took that degree for air traffic control or airport management.
My father was a pilot, and I'm a pilot, and my son's a pilot, and I have a grandson that's 18 months old. He doesn't know it yet, but he's going to be a pilot. So my mentor was my father, and my father worked at U.S. Steel with some of our friends, new friends that I met here today. His father did, and he did, and growing up, we would hang out at Allegheny County Airport. I'm originally from the Elizabeth area. And out at Ross Draver, when Ross Draver was a grass runway, there was a gentleman out there. His name was Chink Edmondson. and probably nobody has ever heard of him, but he was a flight instructor, and he knew my father from flying together years and years ago. And my first flight, I was probably 8, 9 years old in an old J3 and off of Rostraver. Getting back to the point, we need to get our young people involved in this. I'm fortunate I have a son that followed in my footsteps, doing much better than I and a better pilot than I also. He's flying for a company up in Cleveland. And it's just unbelievable the opportunities that has been presented to him. He's a corporate pilot, and I bet you he gets a job offer once a month.
If we could factor it down to a single word, and out of those many words, would they be synonymous with vanishing, dwindling, desiccated? We have a great responsibility to promote and lead, more especially as aviators, to advance general aviation in our community. We're to be that friendly, caring face that makes every boy and girl want to be an aviator. That's the reason why we've joined the flying club, I would assume. So how do we do this? Do we haphazardly fuddle our way through it? Or do we look inside our aviation community for those specialized people? Because most of us don't make a living in aviation. We specialize in something else.
My aviation career started about 35 years ago when I met my husband, Ron Corrado. I am not a pilot myself, but he is, of course, a lover of aviation to the nth degree. So as far as everything else is concerned, I mean, he started out up here as a line guy for Air National.
Before my time.
Before Tom's time. And, you know, he was in the military, and he retired from the military as a CW3 chief warrant officer. And at that time, he had started Skyward Aviation, and he also was flying core flights for Bonnie. So we've been embedded in the aviation community for years. Since we started the business, we now have 3 hangars. We have 5 corporate jets that we charter and multiple airplanes that we manage and hangar and take care of. And on top of that, on November the 3rd, we took over the FBO. We helped Tom out here. Not us so much. And so we've remodeled and trying to change the face of the FBO and up some of the services and, you know, increase business as much as we can and try to give the face of the airport, you know, a little different look.
One quick story about Chuck McLean. Every time I'd take off, I'd take my hand off the throttle. And, you know, which is, not take my hand off the throttle. It was a 182, so you push the thing and it's a plunger. That's one thing I never liked about a Cessna. Why do they have a plunger? But anyway, and then one day I took my hand off the throttle, and Chuck reached over and took my hand and picked it up and held it for a while. And I thought, is this a moment? What's going on here? I didn't know. Then he put it up on the throttle very closely, and he tapped it, and he looked out the other window. From that day on, I've never taken my hand off the throttle, so sometimes it takes a little action, but I wish Chuck was here tonight to talk about that.